It was the first Monday of October. The sun hadn't yet dried the thin veil of dew on the windows of Jefferson High when an old minivan pulled into the staff parking lot in the back. No one paid attention to it. At a public suburban school like Jefferson, there were too many other things to worry about, like faulty security cameras, an incomplete custodial duty roster, and a decades-old bell system that had its repairs postponed because this year's budget was cut by 30%. A woman stepped out of the van, petite frame, a faded baseball cap covering strands of black hair streaked with gray, a worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She wore a light gray t-shirt underneath a janitorial uniform issued by a contracted cleaning company, the kind most schools in the district hired to cut costs. No one knew her name. On her white plastic badge were only the words, "Janitorial staff, temporary." The first person to notice her was a 10th grader named Mason, spiky hair, AirPods in, eyes glued to his phone as he tossed an empty milk carton toward the trash can by the entrance. When she bent down to pick up the carton he missed, Mason chuckled and said loud enough for his friends to hear, "Yo, who let Grandma Asia out to clean the trash?" No one responded. A teacher passing by shot them a quick glare, but didn't stop. Who had time to get into it over some dumb Monday morning joke? The woman didn't react. She nodded slightly, picked up a few more scraps under the bushes, and quietly entered the side hallway. The maintenance room at Jefferson High sat beside the old gym building, an area no student visited unless they were being punished with after-school cleanup. Her direct supervisor was a man in his 40s, buzz-cut, fast-talking, and short on patience. His name was Troy, recently hired as the school's new custodial coordinator after the district terminated the previous cleaning staff due to budget overruns. Troy gave her a top-to-bottom look like he was inspecting a used vacuum cleaner. "You're Aiko?" "Yes, I was assigned this morning." He squinted at her, then turned to a pile of unsorted paperwork. "Clean the C-wing restrooms, the teacher's lounge, and the second-floor hallway, and stay out of the library and boardrooms. I hate it when new hires act like they've got free rein." She nodded. "I just want to do my part well." Troy didn't answer. He turned his back, started texting on his phone, and left her standing there with a mop, a floor cleaning kit, and a facility map scribbled in red marker. No orientation, no welcome, not even a lock for her personal locker. The second floor of Jefferson High was quiet in the early morning. Posters for the inter-school coding competition still clung to the walls, next to a pale pink bulletin announcing art classes temporarily suspended due to budget constraints. Aiko paused in front of it. Her fingers brushed the edge of the paper, then slowly let go. She kept walking, mop squeaking softly in rhythm with her steps. As she was mopping near the end stairwell, a classroom door suddenly opened. A middle-aged woman stepped out, brown hair tied neatly in a bun, arms full of paint boxes and student artwork. She stopped abruptly when she saw Aiko. "Oh, sorry. Do you need help with something?" "I'm just mopping the hallway. It's nothing." "Oh, thank you. Be careful. I just tested some paint on the floor tiles." Aiko bowed slightly. "I'll avoid it. Thank you for the warning." The teacher smiled and walked away. As she did, a drawing slipped from her stack. Aiko picked it up. It was a pastel piece, showing a child standing in the middle of a schoolyard, head down, holding a broken pencil. Behind the child, a large silhouette held up an umbrella to shield them from the sun. No name on it. Aiko looked at the drawing for a few more seconds, then gently folded it and placed it into her pocket. Lunchtime. The Jefferson cafeteria was packed, loud, and chaotic. Students lined up in groups, special program students with priority cards, reduced lunch students with colored lanyards, and regular students in the longest line. Aiko stood at the back of the kitchen area, scrubbing the sinks. She noticed a little girl in a pale blue jacket standing off to the side, holding an empty tray. "Don't have enough money?" a kitchen aide asked. My mom said she'd reload my account today, but didn't have time." The aide shook her head. "No account, no meal. It's the new policy." Aiko pulled out a small wallet from her back pocket. "I'll pay for her." The aide looked at her like she'd said something absurd. "You're a janitor?" "I still carry cash. How much is it?" After a few awkward seconds, Aiko laid $3 on the counter. The girl took her tray with wordless gratitude. As she walked away, Aiko bowed her head and resumed wiping the counter. But in the eyes of some of the cafeteria staff, Aiko noticed suspicion, as if her gesture had somehow crossed an invisible line of roles. That afternoon, it began to drizzle. The lights in the administrative wing were still on. Aiko paused in front of the principal's glass office door, its reflection showing her hunched frame, broom in hand. Inside, she saw Principal Darrell Whitaker, tall, silver hair, gray suit, voice echoing clearly even through the glass. I don't care how many years she's taught here. Art doesn't boost our test scores. It's out. This is a school, not a museum. Aiko looked away. She turned left, heading down a dim hallway where the peeling walls hadn't been repainted since the last school year. Each of her footsteps was quiet, but firm. She said nothing, reacted to nothing. She simply remembered every face, every word, every quiet injustice, ready to turn it all into something no one would see coming. Because behind that old faded cap was someone who once grew up in this very school and who had now returned, not to clean the floors, but to wipe away everything that had made the school lose its soul. The door of classroom 2B let out a soft creak as it opened from the inside. Ms. Jordan, the teacher Aiko had met earlier that morning, stood with her back slightly hunched, gazing down the hallway with a look of worry. In her arms was a cardboard box stuffed with colored pencils, sketch paper, a few bottles of dried glue, and a hardcover art book with a torn spine. Aiko was mopping nearby and looked up, catching her gaze. They told me I have to clear out everything within 2 days. After that, this classroom is going to be used for some advanced life skills program. They're really cutting your class? Jordan exhaled. It's not the first time, but this time I think they mean it. The new principal wants everything to look good on the reports, and art doesn't come with quantifiable metrics. Aiko set the mop aside and walked closer. I saw the drawings in the hallway. They were beautiful. Jordan smiled bitterly. They were taken down last week. Maybe they didn't fit the school's development strategy. She pointed at a spot on the wall, a lighter circle, slightly faded, where a large frame once hung. There used to be a painting there, from a student who won a statewide prize. Not the best academically, but the most resilient student I've ever taught. Asian girl. Barely spoke. But when she drew, it was like she had a whole world of her own. Aiko stood still. She didn't ask more. She just stared at the empty patch on the wall, as if looking back at herself, nearly 30 years ago. That afternoon, the sky was overcast with a gentle drizzle. Jefferson High was unusually quiet after school let out. As Aiko passed by the library, she heard a strange noise, something being dragged across the floor. She pushed the door open slightly and saw a small, thin girl in a hoodie quietly stacking chairs, her eyes downcast. Why are you still here? The girl startled and turned. It was Sophia, the same girl Aiko had paid lunch for earlier that day. I'm waiting for my mom. She's picking you up? Number. She's on the night shift. I just stay here for a bit. It's warmer. Aiko didn't probe. She walked to the back of the room, reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a red wool scarf. Old but clean. Here, wear this. Sophia looked at the scarf, confused. Why are you giving it to me? Because I used to be cold like you. There was no thank you. Just the tender look of a child quietly receiving a rare moment of kindness in a world too quick to judge. The next day in the staff break room, Troy, the custodial coordinator, was barking out assignments. Clarence, you're on the third floor floors today. Aiko, you go to the gym. But Clarence usually handles the gym. I've got gear set up for the third floor. I don't care. From now on, anyone who argues loses hours. Clear? Clarence, a 60-year-old black man, clenched his jaw. He'd worked here nearly 8 years, seen 3 principals and 4 managers come and go. But never had he seen someone as newly hired as Troy Abuse Authority this blatantly. Aiko looked at him, eyes steady with understanding. Clarence gave a slight nod, grabbed his tools and walked away. By the end of the shift, Clarence was called into Troy's office. 15 minutes later, he came out, face ashen, lips pressed tight. They let me go. Reason? Insubordination. You could file a complaint. Come talk to me about complaints the day they start listening to a 60-year-old black janitor. Aiko didn't reply. But in her coat pocket, a small voice recorder had been running through the entire morning meeting. That afternoon, Aiko walked the administrative wing with a spray bottle and a glass cloth. As she neared the principal's office, she stopped. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Daryl, the principal, was speaking with a parent, Sophia's mother. The woman wore simple clothes, her skin weathered by sun, a folder of worn documents in her hands. "I'm just asking for a custodial job, something part-time. I worked in 3 schools in Mexico before coming here. I understand, but to work here, you need U.S. recognized certifications, reference letters, and at least 2 years of domestic experience. I'm willing to work without pay to prove myself. Don't you understand? This isn't a refugee camp. We need qualified staff here." Aiko quietly stepped back from the door, each step pressing harder into memories, like the day her own mother was rejected from working in this very school's cafeteria because her English wasn't fluent enough. That night, Aiko opened her personal laptop in her temporary apartment. The screen showed an untitled Google Doc. She typed the first heading, Review List, Jefferson High, October. Below it were 3 names. 1. Clarence, unjust termination. 2. Sophia, meal discrimination. 3. Miss Jordan, class cut due to unmeasurable performance. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then added one more line. 4. The erased wall, and she hit save. It was Wednesday at noon, and Jefferson High was packed with students crowding outside the cafeteria. The newly implemented financial priority tier system, launched just a week earlier, had thrown everything into chaos. Aiko stood by the sink near the meal prep area, eyes fixed on the checkout counter. A large sign above the register read, "Students with lunch debt over $5 will receive emergency substitute meals only." Students were now categorized by the color of their ID lanyards: green for full aid, yellow for partial aid, and red for students without valid financial records. Red meant trouble. Red meant the emergency meal, a dry sandwich and a small milk carton. No options, no condiments, no fruit. Aiko had noticed about 6 to 8 red lanyard students each day, but there was a strange pattern. Nearly all of them were students of color, Latino, Black, or from the East Side neighborhoods. Not once in 3 days had she seen a white student receive the emergency meal. One small Asian boy, likely a freshman, was denied lunch after his card failed to swipe 3 times. The cashier, a middle-aged man named Barry, delivered the verdict with a tone that bordered on smug satisfaction. "Account still blocked, kid. Unless you want to wash dishes, you get the red meal." The boy lowered his head, silently took the sandwich and milk, and walked away without a word. No one in line turned to look, except Aiko. Back at the dish station, Aiko ran into Sophia again. The girl was placing her tray on the counter and spoke softly. "Do you know why I wait for my mom every night? Because she doesn't want me going home early. The neighbors are too loud." Aiko nodded. "Your mom is very strong, but sometimes I wish she didn't have to try so hard. I hear her crying at night, but she still smiles every morning." Aiko paused, looking at the girl for a long moment. "You know, I once lived in a building with only one working light bulb, and when it rained, the ceiling leaked right over the spot where I used to read." Sophia blinked in surprise. "But you still studied?" "I didn't study because I had light. I studied because no one would bring me light. So I learned so that one day I could bring light to others." The girl said nothing more. She just lowered her head. On her hand was the red scarf Aiko had given her days earlier, now clumsily embroidered with white thread, forming little flowers. That afternoon, an internal email was sent to all Jefferson High staff from the vice principal. "Starting next week, elective courses will be reduced to 3: technology, physical education, and financial literacy. Subjects such as art, drama, and culinary will be suspended this semester to focus on state testing benchmarks." In the faculty lounge, the mood dropped. Miss Jordan sat quietly beside a cup of cold coffee, her hands wrapped around a heavily flagged teaching manual. "Looks like anything that doesn't produce data has no place in this school anymore." Another teacher chimed in. "They told me our classes should only support practical workforce skills, but no one's explaining how you measure when a kid feels seen through their painting." Jordan chuckled softly, bitterly. "I once had a student draw a door. She said, 'This is the place I imagine when my parents fight.' Tell me, is that what they call a useless subject? Aiko heard all of it from the women's staff restroom, where she was wiping the mirrors. She looked at her reflection, dull, faded, unnoticed. And that was exactly how she wanted it for now. By the end of the day, Troy showed up in the cafeteria with a group of new custodial interns. This is the lowest rated cleaning zone on the map. But don't let that fool you. This is where 90% of all cleanliness complaints happen. If you can work here without getting flagged, consider it a pass. One young intern glanced at Aiko, who was scrubbing the wall. Who's that old lady? Temp janitor. Ignore her. She's ancient, Troy replied. He didn't correct them. He just laughed and muttered, as long as she stays out of trouble, I don't care. Old folks always want to play hero. Aiko kept wiping the wall, but this time her hand trembled. In her pocket was a paper Sophia had just given her, a copy of her rejected lunch account statement, marked in red, account not eligible, risk of meal suspension. That night, Aiko added 3 more lines to her growing list. 5. Meal policy discriminating based on lanyard color. 6. Staff member Barry, inhumane behavior. 7. Troy, ageism and enabling internal bullying. She clicked save and stared at her laptop screen as if looking into her own past. A past of dust, her mother's bloodied hands and soft-spoken rejections. But she had survived. And now, seeing children like Sophia and that boy with the dry sandwich, she knew some wounds were repeating themselves in a school that claimed to elevate education. No one imagined the woman scrubbing the wall would be the one to wipe the rot out of the entire system. Friday came with gray skies, colder wind than usual, and yet Jefferson High started its day like the world outside wasn't falling apart. The coffee in the staff lounge was still as weak as tap water. The copy machine still groaned like it was dying, and the leaves around the schoolyard still fell like no one planned to sweep them up. But this morning, something was different. Aiko noticed Clarence wasn't there. He was usually the first to arrive, unlocking the supply room, checking the task board, and brewing coffee with the old metal drip pot he brought from home. But today, the supply room was still locked, the equipment untouched, and the coffee remained unmade. Troy walked in at 8:10 a.m., holding a fresh Starbucks cup, irritation in his eyes from having to attend an early meeting. Who the hell let trash pile up in the gym wing? Where's Clarence? A young intern replied. Haven't seen him all morning. Typical. Old-timers think they've got privileges. Aiko said nothing. She simply returned to her usual hallway. But this time, she didn't bring a mop. In her hand was a small notebook wrapped in cloth, inside which she had written dates, names, behaviors, and direct quotes. Yesterday's entry read, as long as she doesn't cause trouble. Old folks always want to play hero. Troy, 10:32. A.M. Aiko wasn't writing to remember. She was writing to act, but not yet. Later that morning, Aiko returned to the supply room, not for a bucket, but to find Clarence. She found him sitting on the steps behind the gym, head down, holding a cardboard box with a few personal items, a small radio, some old photos, and a crumpled pink slip. Aiko approached quietly. Clarence handed her the paper. It was a pink slip, a pre-printed termination notice, just waiting to be filled in. The stated reason? Failure to comply with internal policies, attitude inconsistent with positive workplace culture. Clarence let out a dry laugh. I am the positive culture. I was mopping these floors back when these interns were still learning to spell their names. Now they're just scrolling TikTok. Aiko spoke softly. Are you going to fight this? With who? The district HR ? They don't even know I exist. What about the students? A lot of them like you. Kids don't sign termination papers. The ones who do never even ask my name. I know your name. Clarence looked up. For the first time, he studied Aiko more closely. What's yours again? Aiko? Yes. Sounds Japanese. Born in Fresno. But my mother was Japanese. Then you understand. In places like this, your skin, your age, your voice, they decide your fate. You don't even need to make mistakes. That afternoon, Troy held his first custodial team meeting in 3 weeks. a staged attempt to realign workplace culture after the Clarence incident. Standing in the center of the room, he spoke like he was reading from a rehearsed script. We need to remember that this is a professional academic environment. Any form of internal dissent, no matter how small, negatively impacts the student body. Someone spoke up, but Clarence just wanted to keep his old shift. He's got back problems. It's not about health, it's about attitude, and I won't tolerate anyone working here with a silent resentment mindset. Aiko recorded every word. He didn't know. No one did. But the pen clipped to her shirt pocket wasn't for labeling cleaning chemicals. It was a voice recorder, tiny, discreet, and always running. On Saturday morning, Aiko took an early bus to the East Wind neighborhood, where Clarence lived. People there knew him like a favorite uncle, grandfather, or neighborhood watchman. They called him Mr. Clarence, the school gate man, because ever since his early retirement, he'd show up at Jefferson's front gate each morning to wave and smile at every student walking in. A little girl saw Aiko approaching and ran over. Grandpa said if she comes, let her wait on the porch. He's out getting apple pie. Aiko smiled. Thank you, sweetie. I don't need pie. Just need a quick talk. Clarence returned holding a pie box, visibly surprised to see Aiko sitting there. I don't usually entertain guests. I'm not a guest. I'm your teammate. You're a janitor. I was one too. There's no team to fight for. Yes, there is. It's called dignity. Aiko handed him a small USB drive. This has the audio recording of yesterday's meeting and everything Troy said last week. I've already submitted a copy to the District Oversight Board. Clarence froze. Who are you? Aiko didn't answer directly. She stood, brushed off her skirt, and looked at him like someone who owed him a long overdue thank you. I'm the kid you cleared the walkway for in 1995. You don't remember, but I do. Then she walked away, leaving an old man stunned in the morning light, holding a USB drive like he was gripping a lost fragment of justice. That night in her small rental room, Aiko opened her private data log. She updated the entries. 8. Clarence, restore employment record and recommend compensation. 9. Audio proof of Troy, submitted to District Oversight Board number 2. 10. Internal whistleblower network, begin case verification. On her screen, the glow of each word lit up Aiko's face, calm, resolute, and no longer just a janitor. She was now quietly redrawing the moral blueprint of a school that once held her childhood dreams and was now run by people who only cared about performance metrics. Monday morning at Jefferson High was just as cold as usual, but this time the sky was dry and a gentle sunlight streamed through the old east hallway windows, making everything seem just a little less worn. Aiko sat on the bench behind the gym building, a quiet spot few people ever noticed, where she spent 10 minutes between shifts not to rest her legs, but to listen back to old recordings, mentally organizing each detail like someone silently drawing up a battle map. She was just about to get up when a familiar voice called from behind. Do you have a minute? Aiko turned. It was Sophia, backpack hugged tight to her chest, still wearing the red scarf whose edges were beginning to fray, her eyes holding something far heavier than a child should carry. Aiko nodded and patted the seat beside her. What's going on, Sophia? She didn't look at her like a grown-up ready to teach a lesson. She looked like an ally, waiting to be trusted. Sophia sat down, legs dangling above the ground, swaying gently. On Friday, I saw my mom crying in the kitchen. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, she got turned down for the job at school. Aiko nodded softly. I know. Your mom tried hard. But not because she didn't try hard enough, Sophia added, her voice lowering. It's because they never read the second line of her application. Aiko asked gently, and how do you feel about that? I feel angry. I think if my mom were someone else, spoke better English, looked whiter, had a degree printed in this country, they would have hired her. Aiko clenched her hands in her lap, not out of surprise, but because in that moment she heard her own voice, at age 11, standing behind an art room door, watching her mother wipe away tears in the principal's office after being turned down for a head cook position because she didn't understand American food safety standards. Sophia glanced sideways, hesitant. Have you ever had to pretend not to care? So people don't see you're sad? Aiko didn't answer right away. A light breeze stirred a few yellow leaves across the steps. Yes, I used to pretend a lot, but then I realized what's worse than being hurt is when you stop wanting to feel anything at all. Sophia nodded, as if she understood. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. A letter, handwritten in a mix of Spanish and broken English. My mom wrote this. She was going to send it to the principal, but nobody read it. Aiko took the letter. The handwriting was uneven but filled with sincerity. In it, Sophia's mother described how she used to manage a cafeteria in Tijuana, how she raised 5 younger siblings by cooking, how she organized lunch for 200 students a day on a budget of less than $1 per child, and how she was simply asking for a chance to work at Jefferson, even without pay. Aiko folded the letter carefully, like folding a precious map. Thank you for sharing this. Sophia looked down at her shoes. Do you think anyone will care? Aiko didn't answer directly. Sometimes the person who cares most is the one you'd never expect. Sophia fell silent for a moment, then said, in a tone far older than her years, if one day I disappear from here, no one would notice. I'd notice, Aiko replied, and not just me. That afternoon, Aiko returned to her rental apartment and opened her document cabinet. She took out a folder, placed Sophia's mother's letter inside, and labeled it, Evidence number 12, Indirect Discrimination via Hiring Process. She added a note, rejection based not on capability, but on linguistic inconvenience. She saved a scanned copy as a PDF, then opened a different folder titled, Sophia, Potential Scholarship Candidate. This wasn't about exposing a bad manager anymore. This was about saving a generation. Kids like Sophia, who had done nothing wrong by being born, but were growing up in a world that constantly made them prove they deserved not to be forgotten. That evening, as Aiko passed the library after hours, she saw Sophia reading quietly, legs curled up on the chair, a soft yellow light casting across her profile. She looked exactly like the girl Aiko once was, hiding from the rain in the same place. Aiko didn't enter. She just stood outside the glass door, her hand resting against the cold pane, and in her mind she heard her mother's voice again. You don't have to stand out to change the world. You just have to outlast the people trying to push you out. Aiko turned and walked away, knowing now that this fight was no longer personal. It was about a school that had forgotten. Justice doesn't need a podium. It just needs someone willing to listen. Jefferson High had a special hallway known as the Wall of Honor, a place where bronze plaques commemorated top-performing students by academic year, program, and state or national achievements. To outsiders, it was just a 50-foot stretch of beige wall under dim yellow lights. But for students and teachers, it was sacred, a monument of names that once made the entire school proud. Few noticed that in the far left corner, just before the hallway curved into the administrative wing, there was a small, oddly empty space. Not large, not obvious. But anyone with a sharp memory would recognize that something important had once hung there. And this morning, Aiko stood before that blank patch like someone staring at an old version of herself through the lens of time. No one noticed her there. It was lunchtime. Students were loud in the cafeteria, teachers were in parent conferences, and Troy was ransacking the supply room over missing floor cleaner. Aiko stood still beside her mop, gloves on, unmoving for nearly 10 minutes, eyes fixed on that faintly discolored square of wall, as if it had recently been painted over to hide something. She reached into her coat pocket and unfolded a piece of paper. A faded printout of a photo from 1995. A smiling Asian girl, ponytail high, standing beside a bronze plaque that read, Aiko Tanaka, California State Academic Achievement Award, Jefferson High. That plaque used to hang right there. Now it was gone, and no one remembered it had ever been there. She crouched, pretending to mop, but her eyes remained locked on the wall. There were 4 old screw holes, unevenly spaced by a millimeter. Evidence it had been removed hastily, not by the maintenance department. There was no reason to remove a plaque honoring a state-level student achiever, unless someone was rewriting history. She snapped a quick photo on her phone and tucked it away. Her hand stayed on the mop. A group of students passed by, laughing. One of them whispered, "Why's that old lady staring at the wall? Looks like she's talking to a ghost." But Aiko didn't hear them. In her mind, she was back in time, 28 years ago, being led there by her homeroom teacher to receive her award in front of a small crowd, and seeing her mother, the woman who barely spoke English, standing at the far end of the hallway, holding a basket of fruit, eyes shining with tears because someone had finally said her daughter's name correctly. That afternoon in the administration office, Aiko pretended to be dusting desks, but she was really there to eavesdrop on a short meeting between Principal Daryl Whitaker and the Vice Principal. "I want to replace the plaque in the corner of the Wall of Honor with the new Daryl Whitaker Foundation logo," Daryl said. "It'll symbolize a shift in vision, something more modern. Those old student plaques, no one remembers them anyway." The Vice Principal hesitated, but that one was for a student who won a statewide award. There were some rare ones like Aiko Tanaka, Daryl cut in with a dismissive laugh. "Never heard of her. And if she was impressive, she wouldn't be mopping floors in our system now, would she?" Outside, Aiko gripped her mop so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't enter. She didn't speak. She just burned the words into memory. Each syllable, each tone, as if recording them with her spine. That night, Aiko opened a folder on her personal laptop. She renamed an old file titled "The Erased Wall" to Evidence Number 14, Removal of Plaque Honoring Asian American Student. She uploaded the photo of the screw holes and added a note. Deliberate removal, no internal announcement. Suspected motive linked to racial identity. She didn't need anyone to confirm that suspicion. She had lived long enough to know. Discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just quietly deletes your name from the wall. The next day, as students gathered in front of the Wall of Honor to take group pictures, one boy asked, "Hey, do you know what used to be in that empty spot?" The girl beside him shrugged. Probably something outdated. And that, more than the missing plaque, was what troubled Aiko most. Not that it had been taken down, but that this generation had been taught to forget the ones who laid the foundation for them. Behind the glass door, Aiko watched the empty space once more. Then she lowered her head and resumed mopping. Her hands moved slowly, steadily, but in her eyes there wasn't sorrow. There was resolve. In its third week of the semester, Jefferson High entered assessment prep season. Banners were hung from the hallways to the restrooms, all urging students to score high. Regular class time was shortened to allow for extended standardized test prep. Teachers were handed rapid cram packets compiled by the principal's office, with a clear goal: push at least 20% of underperforming students over the state testing threshold, at any cost. Subjects not included in the standardized exams, like art, music, and local history, were cut completely. The art room was locked. The music room became a storage space. And for some teachers, that meant watching students who once came alive in their classes fall into silence. Aiko heard all of these debates while cleaning the faculty lounge. She didn't interject, but she took note. Every complaint from a literature teacher being told to replace essay writing with multiple choice drills. Every sigh from a history teacher being ordered to teach from a script. No one raised their voice. They were too tired. In this system, the longer you stayed, the quicker you learned how to bow your head. One day, Aiko passed the principal's office just as an internal executive meeting was underway. She was, of course, not invited. But the door was cracked open, and Daryl's voice rang out like a bell. "We don't need high averages, we need growth percentages. That means moving students from an F to a C. That's the money stat. If we have to swap teachers to do that, then we swap. If we have to change textbooks, we change." Someone asked, "What about support classes for struggling students?" Daryl answered without pause, "Cut them. Redirect that budget to test prep software. Kids don't need empathy. They need to pass benchmarks." Aiko didn't walk away right away. She looked at the sign outside the door. Jefferson Educational Vision. Elevate to exceed. She took out her phone and began recording the rest of the meeting. Then she silently walked back to the girls' restroom. That afternoon, Sophia found her with worry in her eyes. "Ms. Jordan said she won't be teaching anymore starting next week. I asked why, and she just smiled. But I know why." Aiko sat on the steps near the supply room, gently holding Sophia's hand. "How long has Miss Jordan been here?" "Almost 20 years, Sophia answered. She was the first person who gave me a paintbrush and told me I could create my own world. Aiko looked down the hallway. There are people who can't be measured by test scores, but they're the ones who shape who we become. Then why are they being replaced? Sophia asked. Because data fits better on an Excel sheet than gratitude does. The next day, Aiko faked a maintenance request to gain access to the IT room, where internal academic records were stored. She claimed the floor cleaner had shorted out near a wall socket. While the technician stepped out to make a phone call, she quickly inserted her private USB drive into the workstation. In 90 seconds, she downloaded 3 years' worth of internal test score data, along with a file labeled Target Growth Projection Proposal for Compliance. The header read, Internal distribution only. Do not export outside system. Back in her apartment, Aiko opened the file, and what she saw chilled her. In the recommendations section, a line read, Students likely to lower overall compliance rate suggest temporary reassignment to non-assessed special programs. Sophia's name was on that list. So were nearly 30 other students, most of them Latino, Black, or children of recent immigrants. They were being funneled into alternative support programs, which meant they were excluded from official assessments, helping the school raise its test scores without actually helping the students improve. Aiko didn't sleep that night. She handwrote a letter addressed to the headquarters of ED&W, the nonprofit educational organization she herself had founded, now run by a temporary executive board. In the letter, she requested an unscheduled audit of Jefferson High, signing it as an anonymous investor partner. She used pencil and wrote only one line, Original Benefactor. The next morning, Troy approached Aiko with narrowed eyes. Anyone touch the IT room computers yesterday? Aiko shook her head. I just cleaned the floor. Someone downloaded something they weren't supposed to. Probably just dust, Aiko said with a faint smile, soft enough that he couldn't tell if she was joking or warning him. In that moment, the audience might not know exactly what Aiko was doing, but they knew one thing. A storm was coming. And this time, the janitor wasn't walking away from the thunder. She was standing in front of it, not to run, but to stop it. Tuesday, 7:15 a.m. A cream-colored envelope appeared on Principal Darrell Whitaker's desk. No courier, no postage mark, only a handwritten note in the upper left corner. From ED&W HQ, personal attention required. Inside, there was no bold headline, no official government language, just one page typed in classic courier font with a short message. The parent organization will be conducting an on-site evaluation at Jefferson High next week. Please do not notify staff. This is a confidential compliance audit under Clause 4.3b of the Financial Support Agreement. At the bottom was an italicized signature, Original Benefactor. Darrell frowned. He had never seen any record of an original benefactor in the school's recent financial files. He flipped the envelope over and called his administrative assistant. I want to know who sent this. Check the entire system. Hard copy and digital. The assistant hesitated. There's no matching record, but the last grant we received was from ED&W Central, 12 years ago. Darrell said nothing. He folded the letter, locked it inside his drawer, and turned back to his computer screen, the testing metrics glowing in bright gold. But now he couldn't see gold. He saw something leaking, like blood through white cloth. Interference. Meanwhile, Aiko was cleaning mirrors in the second-floor bathroom when she overheard a conversation leaking from the admin office. Are you sure ED&W is sending someone down? Sure. They never announce unless it's serious. Probably an internal complaint. Who would dare? Probably one of those old teachers who won't retire. Troy's voice cut in. I don't trust that Aiko lady. Something's off about her. Based on what? She never asks anything, never makes mistakes, yet she's always there when things go wrong. Aiko continued wiping the glass, her hands steady, her face blank. In the reflection was the image of an ordinary woman in rubber gloves and a faded uniform, but also the silhouette of a system waiting to have its mask removed. That afternoon, the executive team gathered for a closed-door meeting. Darrell instructed Troy to review all contracted staff files from the past 60 days. I want to know exactly who Aiko Tanaka is, which company sent her, who signed off on her contract, and why there's no proper tax record. Troy nodded and started making calls. But 2 hours later, He returned pale. I can't find any cleaning company registered under her name. In fact, her name doesn't appear in any of the third-party hire logs since September. Where the hell did she come from? Daryl didn't respond. A strange sensation crept into him. Not exactly fear, but the unease of being watched. As if every action he'd taken over the past 3 weeks, every command, every reassignment, every budget cut, was being compiled into an invisible report written by someone who didn't need a keyboard. That night in her small rental room, Aiko sat beneath the soft yellow glow of a battered desk lamp. On the wall behind her were dozens of photos printed from internal security footage. Clarence being escorted out of the storage room, Sophia standing at the emergency lunch line, the erased honor plaque, and the letter from Sophia's mother. She pinned them to a simple wooden board, numbering each one. In the center, she wrote in red ink, "Central question: who does Jefferson High exist to educate, and who does it exist to exclude?" She closed her laptop and opened a fresh envelope. Inside was a reply from an EDUNEW board member. Request for audit acknowledged. Sender's identity will remain confidential as requested. The evaluation will proceed anonymously based on the submitted evidence. Aiko smiled, a rare expression in the past 3 weeks. Not because she believed the end was near, but because she knew she had triggered the one thing no one in this system was prepared to face: accountability. 2 days later, in an emergency staff meeting held in the admin office, Daryl announced plans to hold an open career day that weekend, inviting local media, staging photo ops with students, faculty, and leadership, all with the stated goal of promoting a positive image of Jefferson High amid recent harmful rumors. A teacher asked, "Does this have anything to do with the surprise audit?" Daryl smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. No one audits what already looks clean. Aiko heard the news while wiping down a whiteboard in the library. She went straight to the staff lounge, opened her laptop, and sent a compressed file named Highlights Ethical Concerns to EDUNW headquarters with a short message. School is launching a staged PR event. Recommend audit be moved ahead of schedule. No one in the school knew that the woman mopping their floors had just altered the statewide audit calendar with a single click. And no one knew that on the upcoming Open Career Day, Aiko would no longer be standing outside the frame. She would step into the picture, not to smile for the camera, but to bend the lens toward the people who had never been seen. On Saturday, Jefferson High looked as though it had been given a fresh coat of paint, not in color, but in atmosphere, carefully pressed into something that felt better than real. The Open Career Day had been organized as the administration's final effort to control public perception amid rising rumors of a surprise audit from EDNU headquarters. Daryl Whitaker personally oversaw every detail: the flag placements, the chair arrangements, the wording of the welcome speech, and even who would stand next to whom for the media photos. Students were grouped by their media-friendly ranking. Those with neat uniforms, high grades, or articulate speech were brought to the front, while students usually considered less favorable were told to remain in the back to ensure diversity without damaging image consistency. The cafeteria had been converted into a career opportunity expo, where local businesses handed out brochures and balloons printed with the EDUNEW logo. The gymnasium was transformed into the main stage: large platform, bright backdrop, LED screens, and a centered podium. Daryl, dressed in a sleek gray suit and a light blue tie, stood behind the curtains, surveying the scene and nodding with satisfaction. "Everything looks in order. We're not going to lose control of our image over a few isolated complaints." Meanwhile, Aiko stood near the equipment storage room to the right of the stage. She wasn't on the guest list. No one had invited her, and yet no one stopped her either. After all, who would bother to question an elderly janitor in a faded uniform and rubber gloves? She carried her mop as usual, but it wasn't in use today. In her left pocket was a USB drive. In her right, a checklist marked in red. Every name, every act, every date, and quote. At 9 a.m., the auditorium was full. 300 students, 70 teachers, nearly 100 parents and guests, and a handful of local reporters sat in neat clusters. On the LED screen above the stage, a well-edited promotional video began. Smiling students, cheerful teachers, high test scores, interviews with model students, all color-corrected with an inspiring musical score. As the video ended, Daryl walked onto the stage to polite, pre-rehearsed applause. "We are proud to be one of the pioneers in modern education reform," he declared, "where students aren't just taught to know, but trained to do." Every sentence was delivered with a politician's cadence. The lights were set just right, enough to make his face appear sincere, but not quite real. But then, just as he introduced the next segment, "And now please enjoy a special video on Jefferson High's journey toward excellence," something changed. The LED screen flickered black. Then a white line of text appeared. "Jefferson High, the truth they don't show you." Then came the audio. From a boardroom meeting, Daryl's voice, crystal clear, echoing across the now silent gym. "Kids don't need empathy. They need to pass benchmarks. If we have to drop a few who drag down the numbers, then so be it." No clapping, no sound. Every eye turned to the screen. Next came the images. Sophia with her tiny milk carton and dry sandwich. Ms. Jordan clutching a box of supplies as she exited the art room. Clarence being dismissed from the supply room. The honor plaque with Aiko's name, removed and discarded. A student whispered, "That janitor. No, that's her." A teacher stood, eyes wet. A parent leaned over and asked, "Is this real?" And then, unscripted, without signal, Clarence stepped forward. He held his worn fabric cap in his hand and clapped. 3 times. Slow, solid, unpolished. 3 claps that shook the room. Then the auditorium rose, row by row, into a standing ovation. Not for the video, for the truth. Daryl stood frozen. Troy gasped, his face ghost white. A member of the district education board, who had come only for a visit, stepped onto the stage and spoke without a microphone. "Begin immediate internal review. The principal is hereby suspended. All records are to be seized for audit." Gasps filled the hall. A reporter lifted her camera and began live streaming right then and there. Outside, teachers stood watching through the windows, their hands clasped tightly together, not saying a word. Aiko exited through the side door. She walked past the east hallway, the one that once held her honor plaque. When she stopped, a young girl followed and asked softly, "Who are you really?" Aiko turned, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a faded plastic badge. Aiko Tanaka, Executive Chair, EDU and EW. She didn't say a word. The girl looked at the badge, then back at the woman in front of her. Hair streaked with silver, plain uniform, hands creased by time, and understood something most people never teach. Justice doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears old shoes, carries a mop, and stands quietly in a crowd just to prove that what's invisible can still bring down the whole system. The news spread like wildfire. Within just 24 hours of the fateful assembly, Jefferson High, once an unremarkable public school, became a statewide headline. Every major news outlet picked it up. CNN ran the banner. EDU new founder posed as janitor to expose corruption in public education. The hashtag number "the CEO with a mop" climbed to top 3 trending. Social media was stunned. The quiet woman with a mop and humble eyes turned out to be Aiko Tanaka, keynote speaker at Harvard, federal education reform advisor in 2015, and one of the 3 founding architects of EDUNW, the organization behind over 60 school grant initiatives across the United States. At Jefferson High, the atmosphere shifted from suspicion to shock. One teacher walked into the lounge, slammed a coffee mug on the table, and muttered, "I've been complaining for 3 years, and it was the janitor who actually listened." Another stood frozen. "I once asked to reduce my hours to care for my son. They said no, but she remembered every story like we were teammates." Students began sharing the video, the photos, the thank yous. The image of Aiko plugging a USB into the sound system during the ceremony became an icon online, a silent act that roared louder than any speech. On the 3rd floor in a conference room that had been unused for years, Aiko sat at a round table with 3 representatives from EDNU Central. In front of her was a folder labeled Reinstatement of Executive Authority, Section 7 Compliance. The regional director began, "Ms. Tanaka, If you choose to reassume executive oversight at Jefferson High, you'll have full authority over hiring, dismissals, budget allocations, and instructional policy for the next 12 months. The legal counsel added, but you will also face complaints, media attention, and potentially litigation from individuals affected by your findings. Aiko looked at the folder, then up, her eyes no longer weary like they had been for weeks, but instead filled with a strange calm. I'm not coming back to take charge, she said. I'm coming back to pick up what others threw away. She signed. The name Aiko Tanaka was no longer hidden behind a janitor badge. It was printed clearly on the official directive, next to EDUNUW's red seal. Jefferson High was officially placed under special reform status. Principal Darrell Whitaker was suspended. All financial and personnel data were sealed for investigation. That same afternoon, an emergency assembly was held in the gymnasium, the same space that, just 48 hours prior, had broadcast the video that changed everything. Aiko walked onto the stage, no mop in hand, no apron, no gloves. She wore a simple gray button-down shirt, plain slacks, no makeup, no badge. Before her were nearly 400 people, teachers, students, parents, even former staff like Clarence. She didn't start with grand statements. She simply looked at them and said, "My name is Aiko Tanaka, and I used to be a student at Jefferson High." No one spoke. They didn't need to. She told them about the day her mother attended parent-teacher conferences without fully understanding English, just standing outside the classroom with a basket of fruit. She recalled winning a statewide academic award, and no one saying her name right. She told them why she left the system, not because she had failed, but because she felt like she was becoming part of what was broken, and why she returned, not for status, but because she couldn't stand to see a little girl named Sophia erased from the system just for not fitting someone's performance target. "I didn't come to be a hero," she said. "I came to clean." The room fell silent. Then Clarence, our standing in the very back, and called out, "You want me to help?" Aiko smiled. "I need you now more than ever." A teacher raised her hand. "I'll give up my tutoring hours if we can bring back the art class." A student shouted, "Can you change the lunch menu back? That rubber sandwich has been killing us for 2 years." The entire gym burst into laughter. Aiko smiled, promising nothing grand. She simply said, "We start again today, not with anger, but with memory." That night, the Internal Communications Office released a special notice. Beginning tomorrow, Jefferson High would close for 3 days to restructure from within. All faculty and staff would participate in a series of forums on internal equity, unheard voices, and community autonomy. The program was titled Reset Jefferson. Outside the school gates, a new sign was installed. Beneath the bold lettering of Jefferson High was a smaller but deeply resonant line, "A community school reclaimed by its people." 3 days after the historic assembly, Jefferson High was no longer Jefferson High. From the outside, the building remained unchanged. Red brick walls, neatly planted trees, a deep blue sign. But inside, everything was being rebuilt from the roots. Aiko didn't hold an inauguration. She didn't send long emails. Instead, she printed one short message and taped it to every door. "Jefferson will close for 72 hours for internal reset. This is not a break. This is the first time we're listening to each other." On the first day, every teacher, staff member, including cafeteria workers, security guards, custodians, and the school nurse, was invited into the gymnasium. No one wore name tags. No titles were used. There was no podium on stage, just a wireless microphone, a whiteboard, and 300 plastic chairs arranged in a circle. At the center, Aiko stepped forward, carrying the old mop that had accompanied her throughout her undercover weeks. She wasn't using it to clean anymore. She placed it at the center of the circle. "This," she said, "is Jefferson's first microphone. Not for command, but for testimony. If you've ever felt silenced in this place, stand up and hold it." Clarence was the first. He shared how he had been kicked out of the supply room for telling a student not to litter, and how he was labeled disruptive to minors. An art teacher recalled being told to teach drawing only for student relaxation, never for creative development. A librarian talked about her 6-month-old request to fix a broken bookshelf that had been ignored. Then Sophia stepped forward, a child in a room full of adults. She held the mop, hands shaking, and said, My mom used to clean this school 2 hours every night. No one said hello. I just want no one to have to be thanked in silence anymore. No one replied, but no one looked away. Aiko turned to the whiteboard. She wrote the first line. Everyone must be called by their correct name. Underneath it, she added rule after rule. No one should be excluded just because they are harder to help. Teachers will not be evaluated by student test scores alone. Students have the right to question the system. Parents who don't speak English will still be heard. Each proposed line had to be voted on, not silently, but with raised hands. And before the vote, everyone had to listen. No interruptions, no applause until every voice was finished. For 3 days, Jefferson became a miniature version of a People's Congress. Only here, power didn't sit in the front row. It rested in the stories people carried with them. By the afternoon of day 2, Aiko divided everyone into small groups. Teachers, support staff, student reps, alumni, parents, even those who had once been rejected or laid off. She invited them back, not to assign blame, but to help rewrite. A young woman, once denied a cafeteria job for insufficient food safety credentials, stood up and proposed, "Let's give parents a permanent seat on the school advisory board." The room erupted in applause. An 11th grader, one of the students excluded from testing reports, suggested that every academic metric be paired with an emotional accountability score. Students could rate teachers on empathy and fairness. Aiko nodded. We won't just measure progress, we'll measure kindness. On the third day, the first draft of the new Jefferson Charter was completed, not written by Aiko, not by a lawyer, but by a group of 17 people, from Sophia to Clarence, from the biology teacher to the parking lot supervisor. Sitting down together, editing every sentence to ensure that when students walked into their classrooms, they wouldn't just see a curriculum, they would see themselves in how the school was governed. At the end of the day, Aiko returned to the center of the gym and gave one final message. We are not remaking Jefferson because we were wrong. We are remaking it because we stayed silent when others were wronged. And from today, that silence is no longer our default. A student raised a hand. So, who's the new principal? Aiko paused, then said, I will serve as principal in residence for the next 3 months. After that, the entire school will vote, openly, for who leads next. The room buzzed, not in protest, but in awe. For the first time, leadership wasn't being dictated by some distant board. That evening, a single sentence was pinned to the school's bulletin board. Jefferson High, rewritten by everyone who was left out. 2 months later, Jefferson High was no longer an overlooked name in local news. It had become the epicenter of a movement spreading across California. The new school reform model was being called the Tanaka model, a framework where students, teachers, and the community co-wrote school policies from the ground up. 17 other public schools had already applied to transition under the same model. The press called it a bottom-up education revolution. But to Aiko, it was much simpler, giving voices back to those who were once told to stay silent. That morning, a dark yellow school bus pulled up in front of Jefferson High. One by one, students stepped off with colorful backpacks and bright eyes. There were no hollow slogans on the school walls. Only a small wooden sign planted in the garden read, "If you don't see yourself in the rules, propose a new one." Sophia, now a senior, stepped into the reopened library where she found Ms. Jordan's old box of colored pencils displayed behind glass. Each box bore a handwritten label. Touch this if you believe the world can still be gentle. Across campus, a group of students were recording an episode of their new podcast, Jefferson Speaks, which aired every Friday, featuring interviews with everyone from the school guard to the head cook, from math champions to the boy once suspended for unauthorized graffiti, now leading the community art club. Inside the main office, Aiko was quietly packing up her things. Her 3-month term as principal in residence had ended, and she had turned down every offer to stay on. I didn't come here to be a symbol, she had said. I came to unlock a door, then step aside so others could walk in. Her staff ID was left on the desk, next to the old mop, now encased in glass with a plaque that read, "The first key to reopening a school." Clarence walked in, coffee in hand. "So you're really leaving?" Aiko nodded. Will you take care of this place for me? Clarence smiled. I'm not replacing you. I'm just going to keep mopping the floors. But now, they belong to a place that listens. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Aiko asked, Do you think people will forget all this? Clarence shrugged. Maybe, but we don't build things to be remembered. We build them so others can remember themselves. On her way out, Aiko passed the bulletin board, now displaying photos of the 5 students elected to lead the new Jefferson Reform Council. In the center stood a petite Asian girl with a high ponytail. Her name, Mai Tanaka, Aiko's daughter. Aiko had never disclosed that. Mai had enrolled through the standard admissions process. No one knew her mother had once been a CEO. But now when Mai wrote on the suggestion board, My mom once mopped these floors, and I believe everyone deserves the chance to rise from them. The truth no longer needed to be hidden. Before leaving, Aiko walked to the east hallway, where her honor plaque had once hung. The plaque had been restored, along with 24 others removed by the previous administration. Below each one now was a new inscription. Every voice deserves to be remembered. Aiko placed her hand on her own nameplate, then walked away, without looking back. The final scene, a classroom in session. The teacher wasn't on a podium. The students weren't silent. They were debating about history, justice, and the right to question the system. Sophia raised her hand. If silence ever made us wrong, then from now on, let's learn to speak up, even if no one asks yet. The whole class nodded. Camera pans to the chalkboard behind them. Written boldly in white chalk, the legacy we leave is how we choose to listen. Thank you for watching this powerful, true inspired story of Aiko Tanaka in Jefferson High. If this story touched something inside you, a memory of injustice, a forgotten moment, or a dream you never said out loud, please hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone you believe deserves to be heard. Comment below. If you could rewrite one rule from your old school, what would it be? Don't forget to turn on the notification bell, because change doesn't begin with famous names. It begins with ordinary people who dare to stand up. Underdog stories, Yush education reform, Yush real heroes, Dus the KO with a mop, Jefferson High.